Hello everyone, I'm Chris, and this is everything you need to know before watching Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, releasing February 17th. If you end up enjoying this video and want to see more from us, then make sure to click that subscribe button and click the bell to know anytime we upload a new video. With the new year comes another year of Marvel releases, and for 2023, they'll be starting up with the release of their third Ant-Man-led installment, through which they'll continue planting the seeds for the next Avengers film, Avengers: The Kang Dynasty, releasing in 2025, as Ant-Man, the Wasp, and the Pym and Scott families will have the honor of being the first to face Kang the Conqueror, another variant of He Who Remains, who we met back in 2021 in Season 1 of Marvel's Disney Plus series, Loki. So as we approach the start of the MCU's fifth phase, we're going to take a look through Ant-Man and the Wasp's journey in the MCU so far, as well as explain who Kang the Conqueror is. But make sure, if you haven't already, to go check out each of the necessary Marvel installments leading up to the new film, which will be listed in the description so you can enjoy them for yourself. But if you have seen them and are just looking for a quick refresher, then you've come to the right place. We're first introduced to Scott Lang in 2015, following his release from prison, where he had spent the last 3 years after being convicted of stealing money from his employers and giving it to their overcharged customers. Fresh out of prison, he's picked up by his old cellmate, Louise, who's agreed to let him stay at his place until he gets back on his feet, since following his arrest, his now ex-wife Maggie filed for divorce, so he no longer has a place to live upon his return. On top of this, he also needs to pay Maggie for their daughter Cassie's child support, who he's not allowed to visit until he does. But after crunching the numbers, he realizes it'll take over a year to see his daughter again while making minimum wage, so he goes to Louise, who earlier had spoken of a tip he'd gotten about some rich old guy with a big safe going on vacation for the week, and Scott agrees to work with him and his friends Kurt and Dave, the former an identity theft specialist and the latter a getaway driver, to put together another robbery. Things go pretty well at first, as Scott's able to quickly sneak into the house and use his experience and expertise to impressively get the safe open, but it appears to have been for nothing, since all he finds within it is what looks to be an old motorcycle suit, which he still takes anyway. When he eventually tries the suit on back at home though, he's suddenly shrunken down to the size of an ant, and spoken to through the suit's comm system by the suit's owner and creator, Hank Pym, as Louise enters the bathroom and turns on the bath water, unknowingly sending Scott flying out of the tub and through a crack in the floor, before he then falls in and out of multiple apartments and lands on top of a car. After finally managing to re-enlarge himself, he rushes to return the suit to Hank's home, terrified of what he's just experienced. But after doing so, he's caught by police and arrested. Hank soon meets with him while in custody though, posing as his lawyer, and offers him a choice: either stay in jail and miss more time with his daughter, or go back to his cell and await further instructions. And of course Scott chooses the latter, so he's helped to escape by Hank and a bunch of ants under his control, who transport him to the Pym household, where he explains why he seeks Scott out. Back in the 1980s, Hank was an entomologist and physicist that had also acted as a superpowered soldier known as Ant-Man for S.H.I.E.L.D., an American special law enforcement and counterterrorism agency, with the use of his Pym particles, subatomic particles that can increase or reduce mass as well as density and strength. He eventually left S.H.I.E.L.D. though, after they attempted to replicate his work, and swore no one will ever get his formula, believing it's too dangerous. Following his departure, he started up his own company, Pym Technologies, though sometime later, he was actually voted out of his position as CEO by the board, with his daughter Hope being the deciding vote, who he'd become estranged from following the death of his wife and her mother, Janet Van Dyne, when Hope was young, and who he claims died in a plane crash. But Hope has always suspected that was a lie. His position was then given to his former protege, Darren Cross, who rebranded it Cross Technologies, to which Hank was recently invited back after a long hiatus to attend a presentation showcasing Darren's attempt at replicating the Pym particles with a suit called the Yellow Jacket. And despite Hank's attempts to warn Cross of the dangers that may come with it, he's continued moving forward with the project. So although Hope, who's actually been scheming with her father against Cross upon witnessing his abusive power, offers to take care of this herself, Hank prefers they use Scott, impressed with his clever tactics as a burglar, and proposes he help steal the Yellow Jacket, with a promise that he'll make sure he can be with his daughter again. So he begins his training, during which Hank warns him of the dangers that come with the suit, revealing that if its regulator becomes compromised, he'll go subatomic and enter the quantum realm, a reality in which all concepts of time and space become irrelevant, as you shrink for all eternity. Hope helps in training Scott as well, but he struggles to get any of it down, which frustrates her as she believes he'll never be as ready for this mission as she is, and grows more resentment for her father for not choosing her in the first place. So Hank finally reveals to her the true cause of her mother's death, as he, the Ant-Man, and her, the Wasp, were sent on a mission to deactivate a missile that had been launched at the US, which he realized could only be stopped if he went subatomic. So he attempted to do so, but his regulator had sustained too much damage. So Janet, without hesitation, went subatomic herself and successfully shut down the missile, trapping herself inside the quantum realm in the process. He spent years trying to bring her back, but could never figure out how. so he made sure to never put a loved one in that position again. With this revelation, the two are able to reconcile, and eventually, Scott's able to complete his training, figuring out how to communicate with the ants and use the suit's abilities in battle, as well as form a friendship with Hope. For the final phase of his training, Hank sends him to retrieve a signal decoy from what he believes to be an abandoned Stark Industries warehouse. But when Scott gets there, it turns out to have been remodeled, with it now being the new Avengers compound. Still, he goes through with the mission, and is quickly found by the Falcon Sam Wilson, who Scott's forced to fight against to avoid being apprehended. And Scott ends up actually winning their short brawl by entering into and disabling his wing pack, before returning back to Hank and Hope with the device. Once their plans put together, and after adding Louise, Kurt, and Dave to their team, they then execute it the following night, with Scott and a swarm of ants entering through the water main, and Hank arriving shortly after, being taken by Cross and Hope to the chamber in which the Yellow Jacket suit is being kept. After planting some explosives and sabotaging the servers, Scott enters the suit's containment cell and goes to collect the suit, but as he drops down to grab it, the suit's lowered out of his reach and he's then trapped inside. As it's revealed that Cross had been expecting this and formed plans to sell not only the Yellow Jacket, but the Ant-Man suit as well to his buyer Mitchell Carson, who's revealed to be a Hydra conspirator. Before he completes the transaction though, he looks to kill Hank and Hope, who he'd realized was conspiring against him. But just then, Scott breaks out of his cell using Pym particle discs and takes out each of Cross's men. Cross still manages to land a gunshot to Hank's chest, although he'd luckily been wearing a bulletproof vest before escaping, while Carson also manages to escape with Cross's formula. As Hank and Hope make their escape as well, using Hank's tank keychain that turns out to be an actual tank, just shrunken down. Scott follows after Cross onto his private helicopter, from which Cross is forced to watch as his company's facility is blown up, prompting him to put on the Yellow Jacket suit and have an ant-sized battle with Scott, traveling out of the chopper in a briefcase all the way to the ground below into someone's backyard. And although Scott's able to whack Cross into the bug zapper, before he can finish the job, he's tracked down by a couple of cops, one of which being his ex-wife's boyfriend, Jim Paxton, who's never been a big fan of Scott. So they tase him and plan to take him in, but have to change their route upon learning of a situation at Cassie's home address, as Cross had just made his way there. Once there, Scott's able to get his helmet back on while the cops are distracted, and shrink down to escape into the house and confront Cross, who he engages in another brawl with, during which Scott attacks him with some of Cassie's toys that he's able to enlarge with the Pym particle discs, although he does end up accidentally enlarging an ant too. Paxton soon makes his way up to Cassie's room as well, and tries to get her out of there at the behest of Scott, but he's still unable to overpower Cross, and realizes the only way to protect Cassie will be to go subatomic to dismantle his suit, which he ultimately does, causing the Yellow Jacket to uncontrollably shrink and kill Cross, as Scott continues to shrink smaller and smaller before eventually entering the quantum realm, in which it appears he'll be stuck forever. But he gets the idea to attach one of the Pym particle discs to the suit's regulator to hopefully re-enlarge himself, and it works, with him returning to share a warm embrace with his daughter. Following Cross's defeat, Scott's return from the quantum realm gives Hank new hope that bringing back Janet may be possible after all, and Hope and Scott finally lean into their growing attraction for one another by sharing a kiss. The recent events have also led Hank to have a change of heart, and he finally decides to present Hope with a new and improved Wasp suit. While back at Scott's home, Paxton, after witnessing Scott's bravery, helps get the police off his back, and it appears his heroism has convinced them to allow him back into Cassie's life as the family shares a nice dinner together, along with their new giant pet ant. During said dinner, Scott gets a call from and later meets with Louise, who's found through his connections that Sam Wilson is actually looking for him. Throughout all this going on with Scott, the Avengers have found themselves in a dispute with the US government, as the destruction left behind from the heroes' battles against superhuman threats have led the United Nations to create the Sokovia Accords, a set of legal documents that puts the Avengers under the supervision of an international panel, so they can be used only when that panel deems it necessary, and if the heroes choose not to sign said documents and continue using their superhuman abilities, they'll become fugitives of the law. Eventually, about half the team decides to sign, including Iron Man, War Machine, Black Widow, and the Vision, while the other half, Captain America, Falcon, Hawkeye, and Wanda Maximoff, decide not to, which creates quite a bit of tension between the group that eventually leads to a huge battle. So to aid them in their fight, Cap, Falcon, Hawkeye, and Wanda recruit Scott, who proves himself to be very useful, as during the fight, he enlarges himself to around 100 feet tall. But he, Hawkeye, Wanda, and Falcon ultimately end up imprisoned on the Raft, an underwater prison for enhanced individuals for their part in the battle, although they're later given the opportunity to escape, as Captain America arrives to break them out. But Scott chooses to stay behind and make a deal with the US government, in which he agrees to be put on house arrest for the next 2 years, and to no longer use his super suit. So over those 2 years, he spends most of his time finding creative ways to have fun at home with his daughter Cassie, and even with him being stuck at home, he still manages to start up his own security company, Ex-Con Security Consultants, with Louise, Dave, and Kurt, as a means of making an honest income. After spending his third to last day stuck at home with his daughter, Scott takes a bath nap, during which he has a vision from his journey into the quantum realm and sees flashes of Hank Pym's wife Janet, and he suddenly jolts awake after seemingly reliving one of her memories. This strange dream prompts him to call Hank up, who, as well as Hope, had severed all ties with Scott after he used their technology with the Avengers without their consent, which forced them into hiding as the United Nations ruled their tech a breach of the Sokovia Accords. But after hearing he might have seen Janet, Hope sneaks into his house and knocks him out, before taking him over to their lab and leaving his ankle monitor on an enlarged ant to avoid suspicion from the FBI. Once in their lab, they reveal that over the last 2 years, they've built a tunnel to the quantum realm to hopefully bring Janet home, although they haven't been able to power it for longer than a split second. But immediately following that split second it was opened, they received Scott's phone call. And after having Scott further explain what he saw, they realized that it must have been a message placed in his head by Janet while he was down there. So they head over to a planned meeting with black market dealer Sonny Birch to collect the final piece they need to power up the tunnel. But things quickly go sideways as Hope's forced to fight them off as the Wasp, which she successfully manages to do. As she goes to leave with the component though, she's ambushed by an unknown assailant with the ability to quantum phase through matter, so Hank's forced to give Scott a new Ant-Man suit so he can help, as Scott had apparently destroyed the other one, so the government wouldn't find it. Once he joins the fight though, the masked woman instead heads over to Hank's van and threatens him into giving her his shrunken portable lab containing the quantum tunnel. With nowhere else to go, the trio head over to Ex-Con to regroup in their office, before then traveling to the University of California, Berkeley, to meet with Hank's former colleague from his time working with S.H.I.E.L.D., Bill Foster, who he'd since had a falling out with. He and Hank quickly begin arguing upon their arrival, but still, he does lend an idea on how to track their lab by modifying one of the regulators. And his idea actually works, with them soon tracking down and heading over to the lab's location. There they find the woman that attacked them earlier, who they've labeled Ghost, resting inside a quantum energy chamber. But just before they can grab the lab, she awakens and restrains them before revealing herself to be Ava Starr, the daughter of another of Hank's former colleagues, Elias Starr, that also had a falling out with Hank that led him to being fired and discredited, leading Elias to continue his research alone and attempt to create a quantum tunnel. But his experiment went wrong and the resulting explosion killed him and his wife, while Ava was left with molecular disequilibrium that causes her cells to be torn apart and stitched back together over and over again. It's also revealed that she's been being looked after by Bill Foster since the incident, but although he tried to protect her, others at S.H.I.E.L.D. saw her as an opportunity and trained her to be a stealth operative, with the promise they'd cure her. But they never did, as S.H.I.E.L.D. was taken down before they could, so she was taken in by Foster and the two began tracking Hank, hoping he'd bring them something valuable. And he soon did with his completed quantum tunnel, which they plan on using to extract the quantum energy from Janet's body and cure Ava. Before they can move forward with that plan though, Scott, Hank, and Hope are aided in their escape by some of Hank's enlarged ants, and they're able to regain possession of the lab. They then head into the forest to finish up their tunnel, but just as they get it started, it once again shuts down and they're unable to figure out why. In the split second it was open though, Janet transferred her consciousness into Scott's body, and through him, she's able to fix their algorithm and pinpoint her location. But before they can go find her, Scott gets a call from Louise, who had called him earlier in need of help fixing their security plans for the next day's proposal that will make or break their company. So Scott told him to meet him at the lab's location. But as Lewis went to leave, he was stopped by Sonny Birch and his associates, who then injected him with truth serum to learn where the lab was, which in turn also revealed the location to Ghost, who'd been listening in while invisible. So Sonny, instead of trying to fight the three super people for it, then called his associate in the FBI and told him where Pym, Van Dyne, and Lang were in exchange for the lab once it's collected. This whole situation pisses Hope and Hank off, who now thanks to Scott have put their mission on hold, while he rushes back home in their Ant-Man suit to avoid jail time. And it soon gets even worse, as immediately after they leave and shrink down the lab, they're surrounded by FBI agents and arrested, while the lab is stolen from Sonny's associate by Ghost. Scott feels pretty guilty for continuing to mess everything up, but he's comforted by Cassie, who encourages him to go help his friends. So he brings Hope her suit and a disguise for Hank to break them out of jail, before taking them over to where Ava and Bill had placed the lab, which Hank then enters while Scott distracts Ava. And after forcing Bill out of the building with several enlarged ants, he's able to suit up and enter the quantum realm, allowing them to then shrink the lab and make their exit. But just then, they're met again by Sonny Birch, who forces them into a car chase that Ghost soon joins as well. And by the end of it, Ava once again gains possession of the lab and begins the extraction, but her attempt is quickly thwarted by Scott and Hope, allowing Hank to return with Janet. After the now reunited families share an embrace, Janet makes her way towards Ava, recognizing her fear and feeling her pain, and she decides to voluntarily gift her some of her quantum energy, which helps momentarily stabilize her condition. The heroes then make their escape from the FBI, who Scott distracts with his enlarged but empty Ant-Man suit, and he's then finally released from his house arrest upon being found at his home with no evidence of him having left. So it looks like they've all gotten their happy ending, with Hank, Janet, and Hope reunited, Scott free to enter the outside world once again, and all their friendships restored. But things soon take a turn for the worse, after the Pym family sends Scott into the quantum realm, using their new quantum tunnel built in the back of Louise's ex-con van to collect quantum healing particles for Ava, which he manages to do, but when calling out for them to bring him back, he gets no response, as Hank, Janet, and Hope had been snapped out of existence by the Mad Titan Thanos, one of the galaxy's most powerful beings, who throughout Scott and the Pym's quest to enter the quantum realm, had begun his quest to collect the 6 immensely powerful Infinity Stones, with the objective of using them to bring stability to the universe by wiping out half of all life, as he believes its massive population would inevitably cause it to perish. And he eventually succeeded in achieving this goal, first collecting the Power, Space, Reality, and Soul Stones, before taking the Time and Mind Stones from Earth, which were under the protection of the Avengers, and after gaining possession of the 6 stones, he did indeed wipe out half of all life, including about half of the Avengers, and as we stated before, the entire Pym family, with a single snap of his fingers. So with no one to pull him out, Scott was stuck in the quantum realm for the next 5 years, until the quantum tunnel was accidentally turned on by a rat in 2023. And upon returning to the world, he comes to learn of Thanos' attack and the lives that were lost. Although those lost, fortunately, didn't include his daughter Cassie, who he tracks down and sees has now grown into a teenager. It's soon revealed though that although Scott was actually gone for 5 years, for him it was only about 5 hours, and he forms an idea based on this information that he believes could bring everyone back. So he heads over to the Avengers compound and meets with the still alive Cap and Black Widow, to whom he proposes the idea of using the quantum realm to potentially travel through time to before Thanos' attack, and they believe that it could actually work. So they reform the team, which had slowly disbanded over the years, and after Tony Stark manages to build a device that along with the quantum tunnel will allow them to journey through time, they prepare for their time heist. With them capable of traveling back in time, War Machine suggests that they just find and kill baby Thanos. But Bruce Banner, aka the Hulk, aka Smart Hulk, debunks this theory, explaining that changing the past doesn't change the future, as it only creates another universe parallel to theirs. So the only way they can actually bring back those lost is to collect the stones from past timelines. So the heroes travel back in time to their previous encounters with each Infinity Stone, and succeed in collecting each of them. Although after bringing everyone back, they'll have to return them, as if a universe is left without an Infinity Stone, it'll create a new branch reality likely to be overrun by forces of darkness. So they quickly put together their own Infinity Gauntlet, which Hulk is chosen to wield, since he's the most equipped to handle its energy. And although it severely injures his arm, he still manages to snap his fingers and bring back everyone previously snapped out of existence. Immediately following this though, the compound is suddenly attacked and destroyed by a 2014 variant of Thanos and his army, who had learned of their plans and followed them back to their timeline, prompting a huge battle that comes to an end when Iron Man gets a hold of and uses the power of the stones to wipe out Thanos and his army, sacrificing himself in the process. And with the battle won, the heroes return the stones to their respective timelines and try to return to life as they knew it. Now that we've covered Scott Lang and Hope Van Dyne's journey so far, let's uncover who Kang the Conqueror is by taking a look into the events of the previously mentioned Loki series' first season. During the Avengers time heist, they actually messed up while collecting one of the Infinity Stones, that being the Space Stone, and actually allowed it to fall into the hands of founding Avenger Thor Odinson's adopted brother, Loki Laufeyson, who had attacked Earth back in 2012 in what's become known as the Battle of New York. And with the Space Stone, he was able to escape their custody. Shortly following his escape though, he was arrested by the Time Variance Authority for his crimes against the Sacred Timeline, which once transported to their headquarters, he learns was supposedly created by the all-knowing Timekeepers following a vast multiversal war that nearly resulted in the total destruction of everything, which forced them to reorganize the multiverse into one sacred timeline. But sometimes variants veer off the path the Timekeepers created for them, creating a Nexus event, which left unchecked could potentially lead to another multiversal war. So to prevent that, the Timekeepers created the TVA and its workers to set time back on its predetermined path, which leaves the variants that veered off said path without a place on the timeline. So they must stand trial for their offenses, which is exactly what Loki's been brought here to do, and is taken before Judge Ravonna Renslayer, who sentences him to be reset, but he's able to avoid his decided fate thanks to another TVA agent, Mobius M. Mobius, who's actually been searching for another dangerous Loki variant that's been attacking and killing units of the TVA hunters as they attend to Nexus events. So he has Loki begin working for him, hoping his unique Loki perspective will help them catch the variant. This Loki variant, who now chooses to go by the name Sylvie, began her war against the TVA when she was just a child, after they'd arrived and arrested her just as they'd arrested Loki. But she managed to get hold of one of their temp pads and use it to escape through a portal, although she was forced to live out her childhood in apocalyptic events across the timeline, as there, she wouldn't cause a branch in reality. So since they'd basically taken her life away, she's put together a plan years in the making to destroy them and the Timekeepers, which she begins to have play out as Mobius, Loki, and a unit of hunters finally track down her location, with her having set up reset charges to simultaneously go off and bomb the sacred timeline, which in turn would weaken the security at the TVA, since most hunters would be tending to the Nexus event she'd caused, giving her the opening to confront the Timekeepers. As she does that though, she encounters Loki, who attempts to recruit her in overtaking the Timekeepers, but she really just wants them dead, so she declines his offer, although she's soon forced to work with him after the two are outnumbered by hunters, and forced to retreat to another apocalyptic event, where they're momentarily stuck, as Sylvie's temp pad dies as they arrive. So as they charge it, they begin to get to know and grow feelings of affection towards one another, bonding over the negative and positive memories of their childhood, as well as their magical abilities, although those powers aren't exactly the same for each of them, as Loki primarily conjures various illusions, while Sylvie has been seen using the power of enchantment over other beings, which she's able to do upon making physical contact with them, although some minds are stronger than others. So for those, she has to create a fantasy from their memories, which she reveals she'd done to a couple TVA hunters, using a memory from their time on Earth, which shocks Loki, since he was under the impression that the Timekeepers created all their workers. Eventually though, the growing romantic feelings of two variants of the same being ends up actually forming a branch in the timeline, allowing them to be caught by the TVA once again. Upon their return, Loki's brought to speak with Mobius, who he tries to inform of the truth that they're all variants and that the Timekeepers were lying to them. And eventually, Mobius finds proof that this is true, so he prepares to release Loki and Sylvie from their imprisonment. But before he can, he's pruned by Renslayer, who then takes Loki and Sylvie before the Timekeepers to be pruned themselves. They manage to break free of their chains though, and Sylvie ultimately decapitates one of the Timekeepers, prompting the other two to seemingly shut down, as it's revealed that they aren't actually living beings, but just mindless androids. And before they can try to figure out what to do next, Loki is suddenly pruned, prompting Sylvie to then steal Ravona's temp pad and prune herself to meet back up with him and Mobius in the void at the end of time, guarded by the trans-temporal entity Alioth. Soon they realize that Alioth must also be protecting whoever actually created the TVA. So while Mobius returns to the TVA with the stolen temp pad to confront Renslayer, Sylvie encourages Loki to help her enchant the beast, which they ultimately succeed in doing, allowing them to enter the Citadel at the end of time, where they finally meet He Who Remains, a variant of scientist Nathaniel Richards, who explains that, eons ago, a variant of himself lived on Earth in the 31st century, and became the first to come in contact with alternate universes and his own variants. But although there was peace at first, eventually some of his variants looked to conquer other universes, resulting in a multiversal war, and from all the tears in reality came Alioth, which he managed to weaponize to put an end to the war, before then creating the TVA as well as the Sacred Timeline, to prevent any branches in reality that will result in his variants rising again.
If you think I'm evil, just wait till you meet my variants.
It turns out though, that for a long time he's been looking for someone to take his place, having grown tired and older, so he proposes that they take over, as he believes, out of every scenario he's seen play out, that they're the best choice. Before they can give him an answer though, he goes silent for a moment, before revealing that although he claimed to know everything to ever happen, from this moment forward, he actually doesn't know what'll happen next. Sylvie doesn't buy it though, and goes to kill him, but she's stopped in her attempt by Loki, who does believe him and thinks they should consider taking his place if it means staving off something worse, which results in a short battle between the two, as she believes he's just seeking another throne. But Loki manages to pause their attack as he explains that all he really cares about is making sure she's okay, leading the two to share a kiss, before she then shoves him through a portal back to the TVA, and ultimately stabs He Who Remains through the heart, who claims he'll be seeing her soon, as new branches begin to form in the timeline behind him. Meanwhile, back at the TVA, Loki rushes to the library in search of Mobius, but when he finds him, Mobius has no idea who he is, and we see that this is actually the TVA of another reality, as in place of the Timekeeper statues is a statue of Kang the Conqueror. And that was everything you need to know before Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. If you enjoyed the video or found it helpful in any way, then make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And also let us know in the comments below how excited you are for the new film and Kang the Conqueror's first theatrical appearance. But once again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.